We are Mike and Jeannie, and we restore old houses. In 2021, we moved to South Carolina and bought a 120-year-old Victorian house. Follow along as we put the polish back on this Victorian masterpiece. Hello and welcome back to another episode of 1834 Restoration House. It's a beautiful day outside and actually fairly warm considering it's near the end of November. So I wanted to show you what we did earlier this morning. We took the paints that we made last week and we applied them to our boards, and this is what we got. Kind of a minty green color. And this is a second coat of white. Looks like that. And this is the yellow ochre. And this one here is the melancholy red, or whatever it was called. I forget the exact name. Neither of these really look that great. So clearly our recipes aren't quite dialed in yet. So what I'm going to do right now is do a color test. So we know that we don't quite like this one here. It's a little bit too minty for a Victorian house. Looking at the ratios, this is a 66% green, 33% white mixture. So I'm going to take it up to 80% green, 20% white. And the way I'm going to do that is measure out 10 ounces. 8 of those will be green, 2 of those will be white. I'm going to add 2 more grams to that. I think it was probably a little too touchy. The problem is with these really tiny amounts, it just doesn't have the resolution to do them accurately. So let's go with that. We have 8 grams of green and 2 grams of white. So I'm going to pour some linseed oil in there. And we'll start blending it up here in a second. Let's get that nice and wet. I'm afraid to grab it. I'm probably going to get myself all oily. Let's get those stray particles of pigment in there. It would be much easier if this thing would lay flat. I can see why the artists like to use a piece of glass, because it doesn't flip and flop like that. If you missed our last video, we did several of these, and what I'm doing here with the cup is I'm basically crushing the pigments and forcing it to blend with the linseed oil. You can actually hear the grit. So as I do that, the grit is breaking down and becoming more of a fine powder. Nice. Well, there we go. Here's the sample from last week. compared to what we just made. You can see the new stuff is a shade or two darker, which is great. I think that's more of what we were looking for. Let's go find Jeannie and see how she likes it. Well, here it is. It definitely has more of a deeper green color.
Yes, it does. I like it.
I like it better than this. This is a little bit too minty in my opinion.
I agree.
That looks more classic, but do you think I went too far?
No. No, I think it's great. I'm excited to see what it looks like on the wood.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, here's a popsicle stick. Let's just put some on there. So this will be our sample. Yeah, oh yeah, you can definitely see it's deeper. We had a lot of fun video that we filmed this morning, but we accidentally erased the memory card, and so we're basically having to kind of start over again. Okay, the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take the same green, the French pale green, and I'm just going to put a little bit out here on the paper. I'm not even measuring it because the ratio here is going to be 100% green, so it doesn't matter how much we put down. If you remember on the last episode, when I did this, it came up with a really deep green that surprised us. We weren't expecting it to be that deep. So I'm going to try to replicate that now so that we can actually take a critical look at it. Because this is a really good candidate for a trim color. You can already see the difference. Let's thin that up just a little bit so it doesn't bite so much. When you add more oil, or even if you add turpentine to this, it's not going to fundamentally change the color of it. What it will do is change the amount of hiding. So that turned out to be a beautiful antique green color. Now here's what's crazy about this whole thing. You add a little bit of titanium white to this, and I'm talking just a little bit, was enough to make it that shade. So that titanium white is very powerful. A little bit goes a long way. I'm going to be brave. I've got this bit of paint here, so I'm going to paint just a little bit on the house and make a little swatch and see how this looks. The paint right here is in bad shape and needs to be taken off, so I'm not too worried about this because it's going to come off anyway. If it turns out we don't like it, we can always paint over it. I'm just going to do up a little bit here. It's going to be a little bit challenging because the paint under there is white. I'm not going to get good coverage. So I'm probably going to end up putting this on a little extra thicker than I normally would. And I just want to get an idea of what this might look like. I'm going to step out of the way here in a second so you can see it with the sunlight on it. This feels really smooth. I'll brush out that. Okay, I think I've got mostly good coverage there. Let me just work on that a little bit, make sure it gets wet. All right, I think that's good. It's hard to paint from a piece of parchment paper when the wind is blowing. I feel like disaster is coming any moment here. But I'm going to press on. Whoa, 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 whoa. Yeah, we're going to fly away here in a second. This paint under here, this old white paint is so thick and so crunchy. Very, very rough from so many years. Okay, there you have it, folks. What do you think? All right, just for fun, we have a couple of other greens that we haven't yet played with. We have something called Viridian Green, which is this deep emerald color. And I'm going to go ahead and try that full strength. And then we have another one here called Cypress Green, which is similar to this one, but it leans kind of more towards the blue. So let's give this a shot here. We'll start with the Viridian. Well, that's about the size of it. It's similar to that, maybe, I don't know, a shade or two lighter. But that's what's amazing about this. Okay, so Viridian in the jar is extremely dark. French pale green is very light. This here is the French pale green, and this is the Viridian. So for some reason, the lighter pigment makes darker paint. I don't get it. Maybe somebody out there who's a color expert can explain that, but it did. That's exactly what happened. Okay, here's another green that has a kind of a bluish tint to it. I'm not sure how that's going to turn out, but let's just put some here on the paper. This is called a Cypress Green. Okay, let's go ahead and get that hydrated. Oh, look at that. It is instantly turning dark. Wow. For such a light color, I'm really shocked at how dark that turned. Those of you that do oil painting are probably sitting there laughing at me right now, but I just can't believe the radical change in a light powder into a dark paint. That is really something. I like it, but I don't think it's right for this house. I think that that's probably still the best choice. Let's get Jeannie over here and have a look. All right, so we have this nice light cypress green. You hydrate it with oil and it turns this deep, dark emerald green. This is very similar to what's on our shutters right now. And then you take this nice light French pale green and you hydrate it with oil and it looks like that. Another deep dark green, only of a different shade. And the weird part is you take this dark green here and you mix it up, and the color sample is around here somewhere, but it's actually lighter. This darker pigment makes a lighter color paint.
Wow.
Weird. Just weird.
That's confusing.
Very confusing. I don't understand it, but it is what it is.
Well, green is my favorite color, and I love them all.
I still think I like this one better as a trim.
Okay.
That one there is the body.
Do you still like it then?
I still do, although I'm wondering if maybe we should darken it up a shade. I just don't know. We've had a couple of questions from viewers that I'd like to address because there's probably a few of you out there wondering the same thing. The question was, What do you do with your linseed oil soaked rags when you're done with them? Because we mentioned that you're not supposed to just throw them away. The reason we don't throw them away is because they could go into spontaneous combustion. Because when linseed oil dries, there's some kind of a, I don't know, thermionic reaction. I'm not sure exactly what they call it because I'm not a chemist, but it generates heat as it dries. And so what we want to do is lay them out flat, don't crumple them up, and don't put them in a place where they can be warm. So outdoors in this kind of weather is perfect. They're never going to get warm, they're not going to get hot, and therefore they won't combust. But the idea is you want the solvents and the oils to dry, maybe a day or two. Once it's dry, go ahead and throw it away. The second viewer question has to do with an old house which is in excess of 100 years old, much like this one. It has plaster, but over time, some of the plaster was taken out and replaced with drywall. And so what she was wondering is, should she put latex paint on or should she put oil paint on? Well, here's the thing. If you have drywall, it doesn't matter what you put on there. You might as well just use the cheap latex stuff because it's not going to make any difference. Plaster, on the other hand, if there's any moisture that's moving back and forth in and out of that plaster, you're going to want that to breathe, and latex paint won't do that. Your oil-based paints will allow some moisture to pass through, and so that's really the best. But the thing is, if you have latex paint underneath your oil paint, it's not going to work. You're still going to be blocking that moisture. So if you have a clear shot of, say, original plaster and you want to paint it, oil paint would be fine for that. But if you have latex paint on your plaster, it's kind of a gamble because latex may peel off. You just don't know. You just don't know. The best scenario, of course, is if you can get all the paint off the plaster, then you can repaint it in the proper paint if you want to. Some people actually like to have just the bare plaster. Other people like to do colored plaster. And some people like to put on wallpaper. So it really depends on what you're after, what you're trying to do.
Colors had some time to dry overnight. They're still a little bit tacky, but it does look different. It looks better. We did put a darker color down here to see which one we liked better, and I'm not sure. Neither is Mike. So, help us out. What do you think is better, the lower one or the upper one? Victorian houses were not painted white. They loved their color. They loved their stuff. They had an abundance of stuff in the rooms, and they had an abundance of colors everywhere. White didn't come into play until the 1920s. So it was quite a while later when the styles changed and everything started becoming more white and more clean because they felt white was cleaner. There was a lot of sickness back then, so they wanted to change that up.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the yellow bedroom. We're going to do a little more paint stripping today and see if we can't get this thing cleaned off. He's caught fire there. I've been slaving away over a hot cobra. It is so hot up here. I had to jump down and turn the fan on, and it's the end of November right now, and we have no heat up here, so that tells you a little something about how hot this thing gets. Now, here's what we're going to do. I have approximately this much left, so we're going to roll the camera and we'll grab some clips of it, but we're going to go ahead and time this to see how long it takes to get from here to here. So let me grab my tool and the other tool, and Jeannie will start timing. If you have any doubts about whether this thing is doing anything, this is what happens if you don't heat it up. Nothing happens. Okay, it took about 24 minutes to get halfway down here. And is that a long time? Well, you could say that it takes a full hour to do an entire strip. So let's say you do that. 1, 2, 3, 4, 4 hours, and you got the entire crown molding stripped off. Not too bad. Now, isn't that a beautiful piece of wood? That is absolutely perfect. It's clear grain, knot free, real vintage wood. It's not MDF or plastic or anything else. It's real wood. And all we have to do now is just clean it up and then re-shellac it, and it's going to be beautiful. So there's that. We'll continue working on it, and we'll continue showing the work as we go along. But I think we have enough video here that we need to stop working and start editing so we can get this video out to you.
Yes.
So we'll continue working on the paint. And there's some exciting developments coming in that arena because we have a new recipe which may be the ticket
Yes.
to the perfect paint job on this house.
We'll have to try that on the next video and see what we can do.
Right. So, good stuff coming along. Thanks for being with us, and thanks for stopping by.
Thank you for watching 1834 Restoration House. If you like restoration stuff, please subscribe. We'll continue to do the work.